This is The Long Road to Publishing, the podcast where we hear from authors who have traveled a long and bumpy road to publishing their books. Whether you're just starting out on your own writing and publishing journey, or if you're all too aware of the many possible detours along the way, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Eva Langston, author, writing instructor, and creator of Eva's newsletter for writers on Substack. Thank you so much for coming along on the ride. So back in the summer, I had an essay published on Brevity Magazine's blog, and I got a lot of comments on it, including a comment from today's guest, Darlene P. Campos, who, as it turned out, also had recently published an essay on Brevity's blog. Hers was about rejection. I'll link to both of our essays in the show notes, but Darlene's comment on my essay intrigued me. She said, "Earlier this year, I suffered one of the worst rejections of my life and wasn't sure how to move forward. At the same time, I have a book coming out next month. It was so odd, and still is, to feel like a terrible writer and an accomplished writer at the same time." Well, of course, I had to know. I had to know about this worst rejection of her life. So today we'll hear about Darlene's publishing journey over the course of several books, a YA, 2 middle grades, and a picture book, as well as her many experiences with rejection. Before we get started, a reminder that there is now a Long Road to Publishing shop on bookshop.org. The link is in the show notes, and this is where you'll find all the books we've talked about on the podcast since episode 1. And if you purchase through Bookshop, you'll be supporting an indie bookstore, so please do check it out. And of course, my usual reminder to rate, review, subscribe, spread the word about the podcast so that everyone can listen to this show, which was recently named one of the best podcasts about the publishing industry. And now on with today's episode, which I'm calling The Worst Rejection of Her Life and How She Survived It. Darlene P. Campos earned her MFA in creative writing from the University of Texas at El Paso. When she's not writing, she enjoys reading, exercising, and going to museums. She is Ecuadorian American and lives in Houston, Texas, with her husband and their 8 rescue cats. Her middle grade historical novel, The Center of the Earth, was just released in September 2025. Welcome, Darlene, to The Long Road to Publishing.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am so curious to hear about your story because, for one thing, you told me that your latest novel, The Center of the Earth, was the hardest to publish novel you've ever experienced so far. And
Yes.
so I definitely want to hear the whole story. But before we get into your long road to publishing, do you want to tell us a little bit about The Center of the Earth?
Absolutely. So it is, as you said, a middle grade historical novel. It's based on the true accounts of Jewish refugees who found safety in Ecuador during the Holocaust. So what I did was I interviewed 8 of these refugees who escaped to Ecuador when they were children, and I merged their accounts into one story.
Oh, that's so interesting. I was wondering if this was something like from your own family or people that you knew, or how did you get interested in this topic?
I got interested in the topic because an uncle of mine, he watched a documentary called An Unknown Country, and it was about this history about these Jewish refugees who went to Ecuador, which is where my family is from. And I love history, and especially World War II history, so I watched it. And as soon as it was over, I knew that this was going to be my next book, that I just had to write about this topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what we all should be doing, right? Is like listening to our intuition and the things we're really passionate about. It's like that's what we should be writing about. Here you are now. This book just came out in September, and now we're going to go all the way back in the past and kind of lead back up to this point. So, when do you feel like you got serious about writing and you decided you were going to write books?
I think I was probably 15 or 16 years old. And I did write actually a couple of books when I was in high school. These are not books that I've ever published or sent out for consideration because I'm afraid to read them at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
But like one I remember that I worked hard on it, which maybe I should look at it again. I wrote a story that took place during the Troubles in Ireland. I did all
Okay.
this historical research. I read a bunch of other books. I watched movies, shows, read poems, stories, and but that was when I started like writing full length narratives. And then when I finished high school and started college, I knew that, I wanted my work to be out into the world. I just didn't know how to get there.
Yeah.
So I asked my English 1 professor in college, because I knew he was a published author. I said, "Hey, how did you get a book out? How do people know like how to find your work and stuff?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So he told me that the way he started was he would write short stories and then he had them published in various journals. And then he built, I guess you could say, a writer's resume for himself. And then that's how he was able to finally get a book published. So that conversation took place when I was 18 years old. And surprisingly, within like 2 or 3 months, I had my first short story published when I was 18.
Wow.
Yeah, so I started out pretty young.
Were you always interested in writing historical fiction?
That is something that I really love. I do have a few contemporary pieces. I think it just kind of depends what mood I'm in.
Hmm.
Like with poetry, I have to be in a certain emotional mindset or it just doesn't come out the way I would like it to come out.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'll write a poem from time to time, but it's like it's just a certain mood that strikes me, and suddenly I'm like in the mood to write a poem. And yeah, and so then, well, so you were in college, you started writing short stories, and then I know you got your MFA. Did you kind of decide from there, like I'm on a writing track and I'm gonna study English and I'm gonna get my MFA?
I didn't start sending out a manuscript for consideration until 2016, which is when I graduated with my MFA. Because up until that point, I was just like building my writer's resume by having short stories, poems, creative nonfiction published. And then by 2016, I had been published about 45 times. And these are just shorter works. So then I thought, okay, I think 45 is a pretty decent number. Then I thought, okay, maybe I can start sending out, my book for consideration. And it wasn't easy. You would think like with 45 publication credits, it would have been easier, but it wasn't. So
And so what manuscript was this in 2016?
this was my first book, which is Behind Mount Rushmore. So that book was compiled of the short stories I had written over the years.
Okay,
And it
okay,
was also my thesis project when I was in grad school.
okay.
So I had written so many short stories with these characters that I thought, you know what, I have enough for a book now. So for Behind Mount Rushmore, I got, I think it was 126 rejections. And that was from publishing houses, literary agents, all that jazz.
Yeah.
So yeah, after 126 tries, I finally signed with my previous publisher, which was Battle Narrative Press. They were an independent publisher in Memphis, Tennessee. And unfortunately, they folded during COVID.
Hmm.
But I will never forget the opportunity that they gave me. Because of them, my first book came to life. And then they offered me a contract for 2 additional books. So my second book was Summer Camp is Canceled. Then my third book was Heaven Isn't Me. And, if it weren't for them, those books wouldn't be here.
Okay, so you had this, were you querying it as a book of short stories or like as linked short stories, a novel and stories?
No, I made it into a novel. So I had to change the original short stories a little bit so that it would flow better.
Okay, okay. So you were querying, I'm guessing, like to both agents and publishers that where you didn't need an agent, is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, gotcha. And so then it sounds like so then you published a couple other books with them, but some of those were books for kids, right?
These are all books for younger
Oh,
readers.
these are all books for kids.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so even your MFA thesis of short stories, they were stories for, would you say young
Young
adult?
adult.
Okay. Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Because I know sometimes MFAs, they don't really want you to write kidlit unless it's, a specific like program for kidlit. So that's interesting. Okay. Well then I guess my next question is what draws you to write for kids?
I enjoy writing for kids because I really loved to read when I was a kid. And I like creating that magic that I felt, as a kid, reading a story for other kids. And the other thing is that kids who love to read, they grow up to be adults who love to read.
Hmm.
It's just what my heart is on. I mean, maybe one day in the future I will write a book for adults. And I have written for adults. I have, research articles that I've written for an adult audience.
Okay, so you published three books with, and tell me the name of the publisher again.
Vital Narrative Press.
Okay, but then they folded during COVID. And so at that point, did you have another manuscript and you were like, now I need to kind of start all over and find a new publisher?
Right. So all of this happened in 2020. They folded in, I think it was October or November 2020. And then they told me that, I would get all the rights to my books back and I could do whatever I wanted with them at that point. So I signed with my former agent in 2020 in January. So this was right before the pandemic hit. She had just started sending out The Center of the Earth to major publishers like Scholastic, Random House, Penguin. And of course, with the pandemic going on and all the economic struggles that came with it, I don't know if maybe that played a part into how hard it was to get another publisher, but it was a tough time.
You had been publishing without an agent. What made you decide to start querying agents and tell me, yeah, tell me how you got this agent in the first place.
Sure. So when I wrote The Center of the Earth, because I was so passionate about the topic, and especially because it's not a well-known topic. So because the topic was so unknown, my goal was to land with a publishing house that had the marketing power to get the story into more hands.
Hmm.
And Vital Narrative was a pretty small publisher, so they could only do so much. And then I did talk to them about that, and they were fine with it. They said, if you want to get an agent, go with a bigger publishing house. I said, yeah, we support you and everything. So there were no hard feelings there. So I decided not to extend my contract with them and start looking for an agent. And I thought, okay, this time, I have three books on my writer resume. I have all of these other stories that I've published since then. It's going to be easier this time around. And it wasn't.
So, you wrote an article for Brevity blog recently, and I think you were talking about how many rejections you got. And I guess it was for when you were querying this, how many rejections did you get for querying the Center of the Earth to agents?
106.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh my gosh. Okay. So then it's like you finally get the agent and then you guys go out on submission and still is it like crickets? You're just not hearing anything for months on end, or the rejections start coming in and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I thought I had made it now that I have the agent," and now like the next big hurdle basically.
Right. And that's what was so shocking was I thought I've accomplished so much. I thought this was going to be easier. One of the big hurdles that we came across was that some of the publishing houses said they didn't know how to market the book because the characters they do grow up a little bit during the story because it takes place from 1938 to 1945. So it's pretty
Hmm.
much the duration of World War II. So some publishing houses said like, well, when it starts, they're middle grade kids, but when it ends, they're in high school. So is this young adult or is it middle grade? We're not sure where to put this, so we're just not going to offer you a contract.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can see the dilemma, but also it's like there's no room. It feels like there's no room for stories that are a little bit different. If something doesn't fit neatly in a box, they're just like, well, it doesn't fit in the box, so we're not going to even consider it.
Right. So that was the biggest hurdle that I experienced. And then there was one publishing house where this editor really did enjoy the book, but she wanted the book to be a dual point of view. And then that's how it became all the odd chapters are told from the viewpoint of Dahlia, who's the Ecuadorian girl. And then all the even number chapters are told from Werner's perspective, and he's the German Jewish boy, and they become friends, and then they take turns telling the story. So I just did a complete rehaul, like
Uh-huh.
rewrote the whole thing. But, at the end, I actually enjoyed the manuscript more. I thought, adding Dahlia's voice to the story really strengthened it. And I thought, okay, this is it. Like, I'm proud of my work. Let's go. Let's send it to the editor. And she rejected it.
Oh, so this was an editor who was basically giving you like a revise and resubmit and saying,
Yeah,
if you make it dual point of view, I'll take a look at it again. And then she was like, no, still no. Oh gosh. That's the thing that always makes me nervous is like, yeah, you if you revise for this particular editor who says they want this particular thing and then they could still say no. But to your point, it was a good note, I guess, and you did feel like it strengthened the manuscript and made it better. So, yeah, so okay, so then you did this big revise, the editor still said no. What happened next?
I, talked to my former agent, and I was feeling really heartbroken about that because I really thought that the book was a lot better. And even my former agent liked the new manuscript. She was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. The book is like 20 times better than it used to be."
Yeah, yeah.
And then she just told me, "Oh, it's okay, keep the faith. We'll just keep trying." But then it got to a point where she pretty much ran out of contacts.
Mm,
So she told me that if I wanted to, I could look for an independent publishing house on my own. And obviously, she would still represent me for the independent publishing house. So then I thought about it and I thought, okay, well, how many rejections have I gotten for the book so far? So I have like, a good estimate of what my chances are. And she told me 35. So I was like, okay, let me see what I can do. So I started, some independent publishing houses and I would mention, hey, like I have an agent, and that wasn't easy either. Some of the publishing houses I submitted to, I never heard back from them, or
hmm.
I got rejected pretty quick, which I guess is good because it's like you'd rather hear a no right off the bat than just
Yeah, I'd rather just know than be waiting for months on end.
right. So then I was looking through this magazine that actually one of the refugees gave me as a holiday gift. It was Poets and Writers magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw this ad for an independent publishing house in Texas, which is where I live, called Blue Handle Publishing. And they were looking for submissions. And then I thought, okay, let me give them a try. And if they say no, they say no, then I'll just move on to the next one. So I sent it to them and they accepted it. And I was just in complete shock and disbelief. And I couldn't believe that I had finally done it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, I don't know if this is when it comes in the story, but you did tell me that it took you 7 years and over 150 rejections before you found your current publisher, plus the worst rejections I'd ever received. Do you want to talk for a minute about what those worst rejections and like how you were able to move past the rejection and keep trying and keep sending it out?
Absolutely. So one of the worst rejections I ever received was the one I mentioned earlier, the editor who made me do the revise and resubmit, then didn't take it. I mean, that did hit me pretty hard. Another rejection I got while I was querying the center of the earth was from a journal that it's a pretty good sized journal. And they actually reached out to me and they wanted me to write a short story for their next issue. And I thought, okay, this is pretty neat. Like the journal is coming to me
Yeah, yeah.
versus the other way around. So I thought, okay, like maybe I have some kind of talent here. Unfortunately, when they had reached out, my grandfather had just died, and I was not in the mindset to be creative. Because his death was so sudden, he had a heart attack and then he passed away just 3 days later.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So, I was still grieving and mourning and missing him a lot. But then I thought, you know what, this is a really good opportunity. I'm not going to pass it up. So then I said, sure, I will have a story for you. I think I said within 3 weeks. So I wrote a
Hmm.
story within those 3 weeks, and then they rejected it. And I thought,
Oh my gosh, you're like, wait a minute, you came to me.
and that's how I felt. It's like you came to me at a really tough time in my life, and you don't take my story. Like,
Yeah. Oh man.
but I was just like, you know what? It's okay. I'll just I have a polished story now. I'll send it out somewhere else. So that's what I did. So later that year, I sent it to a writing contest, and I won first place. I won $650, and I was engaged at the time, and I used the money to pay my wedding photographer.
That's so interesting that like the story that they rejected went on to win first place in another, contest. So, I mean, I feel like that's a really an example of how subjective this industry is. All right. Well, so then, yeah, so got your deal with Blue Handle Publishing, and what has the publishing process been like for publishing The Center of the Earth with them?
So it's been really great. I like that they're independent, just as Battle Narrative was, because I feel like you can get more one-on-one attention. Because when you're with a major house, which is my goal someday, it is kind of easy to get lost in the shuffle. So I do like that part that it's not as small as Battle Narrative was, but it's still pretty close knit. But getting into, the worst rejections again. So earlier this year, I had the worst rejection I had ever experienced. And I had gotten to a point where I had seriously considered just not writing anymore. I thought, you know what, this is it, my career is over. And I know it probably sounds a lot of hyperbolic now, but that this is how I really felt at the time. So unfortunately, my former agent and I were no longer together, I guess is the word.
Parted
We parted ways.
ways.
Yeah, that's the phrase I was looking for. I mean, she still does, represent anything that has to do with the center of the earth because this is a project that, we worked with together. But other than that, we're no longer agent and client anymore for any other project. And the reason why it hit me so hard was because I had gone through a really tough time in my life and I had really, really terrible writer's block for a long time. I lost three people all of a sudden that I loved very much in the span of a month and a half. One of them was my grandmother. And then once I felt somewhat okay, to in my grief, I found out that my mom had cancer.
Oh
And
gosh,
then,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, and then we just kept getting, bad news after bad news. She had thyroid cancer and had gone to her trachea. Her surgery was 8.5 hours long, and then I became her caregiver, and I had to pretty much live at the cancer hospital with her. She was at MD Anderson here in Houston, and yeah, it was really tough. So I really didn't feel, I didn't feel creative. I felt like I was surviving rather than living.
Yeah, yeah.
And then my mom did get better, thankfully. And then about August 2024, I felt better. I felt okay, I can actually sit down and write something new. So I wrote another historical fiction about a a boy living in the Netherlands during World War II and how he struggles with anxiety, which I personally struggle with anxiety as well. And he goes to a progressive mental hospital for the time in the Netherlands. And this is also based on true accounts. This is actually based on the cousin of one of the refugees that I interviewed for this interview. So he had told me at one point that he had a cousin that he didn't know if he had survived the Holocaust or not. And unfortunately, his cousin did not. But in my story, he does. So this is what I wrote. And then I was excited. Like I finished the first draft. I mean, it was a wreck, like any first draft, that I
Yeah.
felt like, oh my gosh, I actually wrote another book. And then I did revise it. So then I had four drafts of it. And then I submitted it to an award for the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And it was called the Encouragement Grant Award. So
Oh, I've heard of
yeah,
this.
so
Yeah.
I submitted to it and I won. I won the $2,000 award and I got some good press from their website and I got to talk with the literary agent who sponsors this award and he was very excited. He's like, "Oh my gosh, this is such a great story. It's so unique, congratulations." And then I said, "Oh my gosh, thank you." So then I felt like, okay, I came out of this really tough time and I got a cash award for this, so I'm doing well. And unfortunately, my agent didn't think the same of the manuscript, and that's when we parted ways. And it hit me so bad because I thought I was doing well.
Wow. Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, I
Okay.
felt awful.
There's so much to go into here. Well, first of all, I mean, congratulations on winning that prize. And that's really like weird, I guess, that your agent didn't want to represent you with like a prize-winning manuscript. You mentioned that your agent still represents you for anything involving the center of the earth. Um, does that, I mean, I guess it's interesting and weird because you said you've reached out to Blue Handle Publishing on your own. Like, she told you, yeah, you can go submit to independent presses, but I'm not going to do it for you. And yet, so does she still get 10%?
Yeah, and the thing is, even though things didn't end in the way that I would have liked them to, I still do appreciate the work that she did.
And I guess that's true that like, you probably did work on some revisions with her initially and things like that. And I'm guessing she looked over your contract with Blue Handle
Yeah.
Publishing. Yeah, but that's interesting. Well, and then the other thing I was thinking about too is I think it's really important to talk about like sometimes we are in a place where we really can't write, emotionally or mentally, because I think there's such this like go 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 mentality in the writing world where people are like, "Oh, you got to get your words in for the day, like button chair no matter what," or the whole like culture of like needing to be always, writing and making progress. And it's like sometimes you're like you said, you're just surviving. You're trying to get through a really tough time. And I think we will sometimes put a lot of pressure on ourselves or like guilt on ourselves, like, oh, I'm not writing. But it's like, it's just, there are times you have to be kind to yourself and be like, I'm not writing and it's okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing is, and this is where the brevity comes in, is that when my former agent, sent me the email that's saying like she unfortunately didn't connect with the manuscript and she thought it would be better to part ways. I was not able to reply right away because I didn't see this coming. And ironically, almost my article in the brevity came out on Monday. So I got her email on Friday, and then on Monday I have this article out.
Oh my
Push
gosh.
through when you get rejections, and I thought, oh my gosh, like
You're right, because your article in Brevity is like, and if I hadn't sent out all of those queries, I wouldn't have gotten an agent and I wouldn't have, have a novel coming out. And then that article comes out like right as you lose your agent. Oh, the irony.
yeah, very, very ironic. And then, I had all these comments saying like, oh my gosh, you're so inspiring. And I was like, I've been crying myself to sleep for the last few days. Like,
Yeah.
do you still think I'm inspired? Uh, so I just thought, oh my gosh, I have all these people who really did enjoy the article. And I just thought, like, what am I going to do now? So then for about the first month or so, I just really didn't do much. I was just, surviving again. I would go to work and I would make dinner and do any hobbies. But if someone asked me, like, hey, like, how's your new book going? I would just cry because
Yeah.
I just wasn't able to talk about it. And I got to a point where I thought, maybe I should just not pursue this anymore. Maybe I should find
Mm.
something else to do. Maybe I'm better at baking than writing. Maybe I should just start like a home baking business or something. But then I don't know why I decided to do this, but I mentioned earlier that I do write some research articles for adults. So I have a blog on my website, darlenepcampos.com. And when I have the time or the inspiration, I post research articles on historical topics. So I've written about the Jack the Ripper case. I've written about the mental institution I mentioned, where my work in progress takes place. I've written about how my uncle and father were taken prisoner during the dictatorship in Chile. And I had written about the Hinterkaifeck case. So this is a case from Germany from 1922 where a family was unfortunately found murdered on their property, and it's still an unsolved case. I don't know why I decided to write about this case. It was just something I guess I felt passionate about. So I posted on my blog in late 2024, and I decided to post it on a Reddit thread about unsolved cases. And I don't normally do those kinds of things. I don't feel like I just kind of like read through Reddit threads, but I'm never like commenting or giving my opinion just because.
Yeah,
Uh,
probably for the
yeah.
best.
So
Yeah.
about a month, following, my agent situation, I posted my blog post on this Reddit thread, and then I received the most beautiful comments. People told me this is one of the best narratives I've read on this case. You explained it so well. You show your empathy for the victims. And I remember just sitting there and crying happy tears because I thought these are complete strangers. I don't know who they are. They don't know who I am. And here they're telling me that this was, the best account of the case that they had ever read. And then I thought, okay, maybe I can do this. And at that point, I thought, okay, I have a book coming out in 5 months. Maybe I should start marketing myself. And that's what I did. I started reaching out to podcasts and blogs and magazines, newspapers, and then I started telling people, that I would meet in my everyday life. I'm an author, and I never did that before because I thought that I would be bragging or maybe I would look arrogant. So if someone asked me like, "What do you do for a living?" I would just say, "Oh, I work in higher education," and I do. That's my day job.
Hmm.
But I would never talk about, the fact that I had books out, and now I do. So in a way, like, the rejection did hurt me very much. It did make me consider quitting completely. But at the same time, it pushed me out of my comfort zones because now I tell people I'm an author and I posted on Reddit, which was something I would have never done, just
Yeah.
a year and a half ago. I do appreciate that part of what happened. And, I couldn't let all those people on the Brevity blog down who said inspired me. It's like,
Yeah.
well, if I just quit now, then I've just lied to all these people about like not giving up.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, okay. So it's interesting to hear you talk about this because I know there are a lot of unpublished writers who are afraid to tell people, oh, I'm a writer. I was one for a long time where, I also was a teacher and then I was a tutor. And when people would say, oh, what do you do? I would say, I'm a teacher, I'm a tutor. And I would never say I'm a writer because I felt like I wasn't legit. And then at a certain point, I started saying, I'm a writer and being like that's my career and I'm going to say it but it's interesting that you even with published books to your name
Right.
you still weren't telling people you were an author like what I don't know like what is that about us writers and we're like kind of like embarrassed or like hiding ourselves away. I mean, I don't know. Now I'm always telling people like, yeah, if you are a writer, you should tell people. And in telling people, you're telling yourself, you're telling the universe, you're manifesting, you are once it's out there, like you said, once it's out there on the Brevity blog, well, you better live up to what you said, basically.
Right. So in a way, the Brevity blog did kind of give me a kick in the teeth and say like, okay, you
Yeah.
have to get up now, because you just told everyone who read this to keep trying and not give up and, go pursue your dreams. And then if I just quit, what image was that going to give? It was a very painful time. I mean, I can talk about it now without being too emotional because, some months have passed. But I don't know if you ever saw that viral clip of that show, Tiny Chef. And in the clip, the tiny chef is on the phone with an executive and he's been told that the show has been canceled. And then he has a tear come down his eye and he says, "But we just won an Emmy." When I heard that, I cried too with this fictional character because I was like, yeah, that's how I felt.
Yeah. Well, it's like you had a book coming out. You had just won a very big prize from SCBWI,
Yeah,
which is
not
like
easy.
SCBW SCBWI is like the children's book association to like it's the association. So to have those two things and then lose your agent, it's like what? What is happening? I mean, that's got to feel so confusing and terrible. Yeah, so now, but here you are. You had a book come out. You have another manuscript, which, by the way, sounds fascinating. I mean, The Center of the Earth also sounds fascinating, and then this new manuscript sounds fascinating. So, where do you think you're going to go from here? Do you think you're going to query agents with this new
Yeah, that
manuscript?
is my plan. I also have another historical fiction floating around in my head, which takes place in Texas. So I'm kind of divided on, do I want to stay in Europe or do I want to come home to Texas? There's no time limit on manuscripts. You can always come back to them when you can come back to them. In the back of my mind, that is my plan. It's like, okay, I can polish this manuscript or I can start a new one and then start querying again. I mean, it's not something I look forward to, but
Yeah.
at this point, this ended up being the best year I've had as a writer because I've done so many interviews, I've made speeches. My book launch event was a sold out event. I was on the radio the week that my book came out. I've had really good reviews for my book. Things have turned around. So I kind of feel like, okay, maybe now it'll be a little bit easier. I mean, I know it wasn't easy the last two times, but the rejections, they do hurt. Some of them hurt more than others, but it's just kind of part of the process.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, whether I hope it's easier this time, but whether it's easier or not, at least you can remember like that feeling of like having a sold out book launch and having all of these good things come from the book that can like push you through to keep going and keep trying and weathering those rejections. Well, I wanted to ask you about because you didn't mention this, but I know you also self-published a picture book that you said is your most popular book.
Sure. So that book is called Mr. Ray's Barbershop and it's available in English and Spanish. I self-published that book because it was meant to be an anniversary gift for my husband. And the first wedding anniversary is the paper anniversary.
Oh, that's so cute. I love it.
So then that was the thought that I had for our first wedding anniversary. And it's based on my father-in-law, who was a barber. And unfortunately, he died 6 weeks before our wedding. So we got married at the end of June
Oh,
2018, and he died May 13th, 2018. So it was so close. And similar to my grandfather, it was very unexpected. He was diagnosed with cancer, I think, in March 2018, and then not even 3 months later.
mm,
So then I thought, there is a story here. He had a barber shop for 40 years. A lot of kids would go there, and I thought, yeah, it would probably make a good picture book. So my brother is an artist, and my brother has designed all of the art for all of my books. So I talked to him about it, and he thought it sounded like a good idea. So I got to writing. He made all the pictures, and I self-published it. And that was all it was meant to be. It was just, this is a gift for my husband, and if some of his family members want to buy a copy, they can buy one. But then it started selling and selling and selling more. And then I thought, okay, that's interesting because that's not that's not what my goal was here.
right. You weren't really marketing it very much, I'm
No, I
guessing.
mean I did talk about it a little bit, but this wasn't something that I meant to be like my most popular project. And then Blue Handle actually acquired it, so it's no longer self-published. And still, like, I'll get messages about, oh my gosh, Richard Ray's Barbershop is such a cute story. And it's like, well, thanks. Like,
That's such a cool story. So your other books that were with Vital Narrative, are they now with Blue Handle Publishing as
yes, they
well?
acquired all my other books too.
Oh, that's so cool. Oh, that's really nice. So you said your brother's an artist and that he does the art for all of your books. Does that mean did he do like the cover for the center of the art?
Yes, he did the front and back covers.
So yeah, so I guess with Blue Handle, it sounds like, and I guess this is probably the case with a lot of indie publishers, is you have a lot more say. Like I know if you were with a traditional publisher, I'm pretty sure there's no way you could be like, hey, can my brother do the
Probably
cover?
not.
Right? Whereas with an indie press, I'm guessing you said, hey, would it be okay? And they were open to it.
Yeah, I mean, they were totally fine with it. And same thing with Battle Narrative. They had their own artists that they worked with. And I just made the suggestion, hey, like my brother's an artist and it would be really cool if he got to do my cover. So I sent them some paintings and stuff that he's done, and they thought, "Wow, this is amazing." Sure.
Well, I guess you may have already touched on this, but what is something that surprised you on your writing or publishing journey? And it can be something good or something bad or one of each.
What surprised me was that even when you feel like okay, this is going to be it. I'm going to get this opportunity. A lot of times you don't. Writers have to learn to be okay with that. That sometimes you feel like, okay, like this is it. I'm going to get this contract or I'm going to get this opportunity or deal or whatever it is. And sometimes you don't, but it's okay because eventually another opportunity will come along. And then for a positive thing, I've learned that writers are never alone. I was just so surprised by how much support I received from the writing community that I have, after my big rejection. And if it wasn't for them, I really don't know how I would have gotten through that time,
Yeah.
because I mean, they all told me like, you're gonna quit? Why would you quit? You have so much to say, you have so much talent. I was like, no, I don't. I even I even got in touch with the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators because I wanted to give back my prize money.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I wanted to say, I'm so sorry, there's been a mistake. You've got me confused with somebody else. I don't deserve this prize money. And they told me to keep it. They said, no, that's like, please keep it.
Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh. But I mean, you were clearly feeling some like imposter syndrome or some just like that was a tough time for you, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely was. And like I said earlier, I understand, the industry has to move forward and everything. So even though, the manuscript in progress won an award, my former agent just didn't connect with it. And it's okay, I I got an agent
Yeah.
once, I can get an agent again. So
Yeah. And you want an agent who truly loves and believes in the
right.
story. So, yeah. Well, and I think you give a good piece of advice too, which is that like you were kind of having a lot of doubts about this bigger manuscript, but then you were doing these smaller projects like the research articles and, other essays and articles. And I do think that that's a good thing for people to remember is like it can take so long to get any traction on a book length manuscript, whether it's, querying agents or being on submission. It can take years and years and
Mhm.
years. And having those little boosts of like writing something shorter and getting it published, or writing something shorter and posting it somewhere and getting comments back from people. I mean, I think about because you and I both had essays on Brevity blog, and then you get all of these people saying like, oh, like I had a similar experience, or, just commiserating with you or encouraging you. And like you said, it's that community can be so valuable. And I guess I just want to say to people out there, if you read an article and you connect with it in any way, leave a comment because the author will really appreciate it.
Definitely.
But yeah, so I think those are both really good things to do is like having that community that can support you. And also when you're struggling with a longer project, doing little shorter things.
Oh, for sure. So I owe a lot to whoever those people were on Reddit because I think, like I said, even though I had the support of my writing community, I had the support of my husband, my close friends, family members who just said like, it's okay, like you've been rejected before. And I was like, no, this is different. But just hearing that from people who were not in my circle, it gave me that boost to think, okay, these are total strangers. They have no reason to lie to me, right? They have no reason to just say, hey, you're a good writer. They didn't know the background of what I was going through.
Oh my gosh, what a wild ride you've been on. I'm glad things are looking up, and I'm hopeful that people listening to this podcast will also be interested now to read Center of the Earth and maybe some of your other. Well, now I need to go get I have kids, so I'm like I'll have to get your picture book, the Mr. Ray's
Yes.
Barbershop, right? Well, I end every episode with a tip for the road for our listeners. Do you have a particular tip that you want to share? And it can be about writing or about weathering rejection or anything else along the writing and publishing journey.
Yeah, I just advise every writer out there to just keep going because that's all you can do is get back up. You can wallow in your sadness a little bit, but you have to get back up.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. You're allowed to wallow for a little while, but then you have to find a way out of the pit and get back to writing, which is the thing that hopefully you enjoy. Well, it was so nice to talk to you. And like I said, I was so curious. You piqued my curiosity when you were like the worst rejections I've ever received. I was like, oh, I gotta know. I gotta know about this. So thank you so much for, being vulnerable and sharing it all with us.
Oh, absolutely. And just one final thing I wanted to share was when I was really feeling very, very down, I listened to the song I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor probably, I don't know, half a million times. And later I found out that, so she didn't write the song, someone else wrote the song, but he wrote the song after he lost a writing contract with Motown Records. So now
Really?
I hear it so much differently. You know, some people think it's a breakup song, and it's a breakup song about a writer who lost his contract.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm gonna have to re-listen to the song in that context. But that is a very excellent tidbit. I'm so glad I know that now. Thanks so much for listening to The Long Road to Publishing. All the books we discuss on the podcast can be found at my bookshop shop, the link for which is in the show notes. You can find me online on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack with the handle Eva Langston. Even better, subscribe to my newsletter for writers at evalangston.substack.com and feel free to send me an email. The podcast address is longroad.pub@gmail.com. The Long Road to Publishing is produced and edited by me, Eva Langston, and the intro-outro music comes from the artist's sound roll on Upbeat. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and I'll be back soon with more publishing stories and more tips for the road.